Don't settle for any ordinary brand. Let Gerry Foster, the branding evangelist, show you how to have a world-class brand here on Big Brand Formula. No more spinning your wheels, wondering what it takes to have a great brand that can have great things happen for you. Gerry wants you to think big and go big. Through his interviews and inspiring teachings, each episode is devoted to giving you the guidance, support, and tools for big branding your business, product, or a service, or even yourself as a personal brand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Gerry Foster.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Big Brand Formula Podcast. I'm Gerry Foster, the Big Branding Guy, also known as the Branding Evangelist. And one of the things that I've shared with all of you as viewers and listeners over the past several years is that I always bring the best of the best, people who excel at what they do, people who have a gift, something extraordinary to offer the planet, something that makes a difference in the lives of many other people. And when I come across these types of individuals, I'm always blown away by just how special they are. And one of those individuals is my special guest today, Rodolfo Carrillo, who is coming to you all the way from Costa Rica. Now, before I bring Rodolfo on, let me tell you a little bit about this extraordinary young man. Rodolfo is a conscious leadership shaman. He has developed a powerful SER model for achieving leadership of the fullest potential, as well as deep, sustainable personal mastery and organizational growth. Rodolfo has a very interesting and unique combination of business skills, along with experience and inner wisdom that triggers profound transformation through his work, which is motivated by his strong desire to serve others in their own personal and professional development. Rodolfo is an MBA graduate. He has been involved in business consulting and training for more than 15 years and has participated as an independent director in more than 20 business boards. He has also been meditating and in a very personal and spiritual development path since he was 7 years old. That's extraordinary. Now, this is a well-traveled man. He has traveled and given talks and workshops throughout the world, having visited more than 30 countries and also lived abroad in the United States and Spain. And this gives him a very deep cultural sensibility, which he uses as leverage in the work that he does. Whenever I have guests on my show, I always like to know who they are and why they do what they do, what their mission is and what their calling is, and what is the impact that they see for themselves and in the world. And in his case, he is no exception. His purpose is to contribute to raising the consciousness of humanity so that we can create a healthier society and world where people and organizations interact with compassion and can thrive through a greater state of well-being. So, my friend Rodolfo, welcome to the Big Brand Formula. How are you?
Hello, Gerry. Well, I'm honored to be here. Besides being great, weather's wonderful here in Costa Rica, so it's just an amazing time.
No, thank you. You know, one of the things that as I was reading about you and learning about the work you do is the whole idea of being leadership. In fact, of course, that's the name of your new book, BEING, Leadership. Tell me about that. What exactly does that mean to have or be a being leadership? What is that about?
Yeah. Well, actually, as you mentioned in my introduction, I studied business. And when I studied business, we were taught about leadership and as a way of almost behaving, right? As like what you should do to lead others, to influence others, to motivate others. So a lot of the focus was on doing. And as you also mentioned, it's like I've been on a spiritual path since I was a little kid. And spiritual path teaches us to be, not to do, right? But obviously we do, right? We live doing, right? But spiritual path is about recognizing who we are and showing up from that state of who we are, from being. So as I started combining my spiritual path and my business path, I recognized first in myself and then with my clients that I was showing up in an inauthentic way. Right? I was trying to do stuff that would trigger behavior. I would help others do stuff, but it was more from the outside. And as I started integrating more who I was and accepting more who I was, and working with my thoughts, my emotions, and my own behavior, but behavior starts from within. Then I started recognizing that my influence grew. And with my clients, same thing happens. Like as I taught them, it's like, well, stop forcing yourself to be different. It's like, this is who you are. This is what naturally comes to you. Use that to show up. And if it's not working, then we need to transform from from that place where, like, from what's coming from within, right? Or from that place from within. And their influence started expanding, their relationships started expanding, and the results started or getting better, right? So I wrote this book called Being Leadership, which is recognizing where is it that we're coming from.
Wow, I love that because I'm a big believer in who we are being more so than what we're doing, because the being drives what we do so that we can then have what it is that we're looking for, right? Now, who do you primarily work with? Is it big companies and teams or small business owners? Who exactly are you serving?
I love working with big leaders. And when I say big leaders, it doesn't have to be like corporations, though I have worked with leaders in corporations. It's more people who are heart-centered and looking to create impact, right? And so usually, and my favorite clients is the entrepreneur, right? It's that person who's building a business, who has built a business, and who is actually from their heart seeking to create a better world for all, right? That's my favorite client in my usual client, because they're already focused, but they already have what's basic, and that is like being driven from purpose, right? And that's the center of being, right? It's understanding where we're coming from, and that our nature is to create good things around us and to create positive impact. That's our natural state of being.
Exactly. And I can imagine you must come across some really interesting experiences and circumstances, because for so many entrepreneurs, as you know, they're trying to get to the next level. They want to scale, they want to have more impact, and they're not quite sure how to do it, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of them turn to what? Marketing. They think they need to create a marketing funnel, or they need to go out there and knock on more doors. But to your point, it really starts within. So how do you do that? I mean, is there a process that you utilize? Because I'm fascinated with this.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, as you said, the processes and the structures and having the right team is all important, right? And I've been in business like my whole life since I went into college, and those things are we shouldn't take them for granted. But if we are not fully showing up, right? If my fears, my beliefs, is the story I tell myself in my mind, is not aligned with what I'm doing, then all of that doesn't work, right? And so how do we do that? There's two ways, or two key aspects to that. One is we need to learn to bring our awareness within. Before I start looking outside at what's not working, first thing I gotta do is bring out my awareness within and look for, what am I doing that's triggering this, right? If your team's not showing up for you, you chose that team, right? And you're working with them and you're leading them. What is it that you're doing that's triggering that team to not show up? So bring our awareness within. And then, and the book is about this, it's about having a model, because as we bring our awareness within, as this was my personal experience, it's like we're really complex, right? So we have an emotion and there's this story that's going on in our minds, and we don't understand where the story's coming from. And people tell us that, just stop telling yourself that story. It's like, yeah, that sounds easy, but it's really hard, right? So I started working with this model of what do we look for, like what do we pay attention to, and develop the tools to be able to deal with the story, with our ego, with the belief system, with our emotions, with our habits, right? So start working with all those moving pieces within ourselves so we can transform them. We can become that leader that we want to be so that we can serve others in the most expansive way.
I love that, because you're saying something that's really profound, which is to be the leader you are meant to be. And we could add on to that, so that you are supposed to be and were born to be. And yet you're hitting upon something that really triggered something within me, which has to do with our stories. Because those stories often occur from things that happened during our childhood while we're growing up, things that occurred with other adults or with our parents. Anything you can share about that? Some stories that you heard or stories that you've come across, and how that affects who someone is as a leader, as someone who's out there to serve others, let alone lead their team or whoever. What are some of your experience or things you can share with us?
Yeah. What you're saying is the key for most people, right? When we're kids, we're being taught how to be, right? How to be in society, how to behave, right, in society. And some of those things become our strengths, and some of those things become our most limiting situations or beliefs or structures. Right? So as we start doing that personal work to expand, it naturally takes us into, when did I learn this, right? When did I learn that I had to be a perfectionist, right? And everything had to be my way and perfect, absolutely perfect, right? And as long as we're not able to get rid of the fear of not being perfect, like using that example, that's actually the situation of a client, right? She was about doing everything absolutely the way it needed to be done, right? Regardless of anything else, right? Or she would work at till 11, 12 o'clock at night. She would be answering emails like at 3 o'clock in the morning. She's like, it's like everything needs to be done, right? Until we, and she knew that this wasn't healthy. This wasn't healthy for herself, and this wasn't healthy for her team, because then she recognized that her team was starting to do the same things, and they were tired, and they were borderline burnout, right? I told her, it's like, why are you doing this? Or we started talking about this. So why are you doing this? She's like, well, I've always been like this, right? So as we went back into her story, we were able to recognize that she was obviously trying to please her parents, right? And this was this fact that she had always been the perfect girl. She had always been the perfect student, the one that shows up, the one that does things right. Then she carried that stuff, right, that she was learning, because she was praised as a kid. She was like, oh, she's an amazing kid. She's beautiful. She's great. And then she carried that stuff into her work. And it was actually that strength. And I love, when I learned this, it was just so enlightening. It's like our strengths, when we overutilize them, they become weaknesses.
Wow.
Okay? So her strength of being detail oriented, of wanting to do things right, when she was overutilizing this strength, it became a weakness, because it was tiring her team. It was tiring for herself, and they were all borderline or on the verge of being burned out, right? So it is really important to see those behaviors and be able to transform them, and the stories that we tell ourselves. Some things are really simple to change, and I'm going to change that. Most things we can easily change. Most things we can just recognize as like, oh, there it is. It's a belief. It's a story I'm telling myself. Most things we can transform when we recognize the root cause. But there are some things that we really need to go deep and see. It's like, because they've become defense mechanisms that we developed when we were kids, right? And now it's hard to transform them, because our subconscious is telling us like, no, we need to keep doing this, because if not, we're in danger, right? We're in danger of not being loved, or we're in physical danger, because we were when we were kids, right? And in this case, it wasn't something bad. It's like her parents loved her. They were great parents. They praised her all the time, but it developed this idea that she needed to be perfect in order to be loved. And that was, at that point in her life, it had been a very empowering believe, because she was able to do a lot of stuff. She was 26 years old and she was leading teams and doing amazing stuff. But then as responsibility crept on her, it started growing. Then it was like, I can't do it all, right? So now it was becoming limiting, right? Because she had to trust her team, and she had to be able to deal with frustration, and she wasn't.
Wow, you must be an exceptional, powerful guy, because my own personal experience in terms of people that I've interacted with over the years to my own work is that when you go down this path with someone where you're going to navigate, as you put it on your book, the inner complexity of what is driving behavior and what causes people to do what they do, defense mechanisms and the whole 9 yards, man, you must come up against some real strong defense mechanisms, because you're pulling the scab off a wound. You're going into, I know you know all this, right? You're going into things that people are hiding, living on top of, sweeping under the rug. Like for myself, for example, I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad was an alcoholic, never spent much time with me, and I made up all types of stuff. I'm not lovable. As I got older, I'm not going to let you get close to me. You may just hurt me. And I remember every year when I was a kid, every Christmas morning, I would love to run downstairs to see what Santa Claus brought me. And Rodolfo, and my parents were asleep, right? And my brother was asleep. I'm looking underneath the Christmas tree, shaking the presents. And 2 years in a row, as I'm doing that, I knock over the Christmas tree. Oh my God, all the bulbs, all the lights, everything came crashing down. And so when my parents woke up later and my dad came down and saw what I did, he just ripped me a new one, man. It was like, how could you do something so stupid and blah, 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 blah. And this happened 2 years in a row. So I made up a story that, and I didn't realize this until I got older and started doing some healing work, that, you know what? I'm always going to play it safe, even as an entrepreneur, because if I take a chance, I'm going to knock over the Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, it kept me playing small as opposed to playing big. But it took that kind of introspection, someone to navigate that complexity, those waters with me. So I'm curious, how do you do this? I mean, are you a therapist, or, I mean, is hypnosis? I mean, how do you, because this is sensitive stuff that you're talking about here that most people don't like to deal with.
It is, and all of us have situations in our childhood that have either potentiate us or limit us. And I love this story. It's a very powerful story, and how you've overcome that, right, to become who you are, right? And all of us have those stories, but there's two things that are key for this. One is willingness, and that's a gift. For when I say a gift, it's like when my clients look me up, they're already willing, right? They're already looking to transcend that, right? And that's the first thing that's really important. And usually, first call, that discovery call that we do it, I tell them, it's like, well, are you willing to go deep, right? Because they may be. This is really funny because a lot of clients come and they tell me, it's like, well, I want to work on my influence with my team. I'm like, that's great, I love that, but we may end up talking about your childhood. Are you willing to do that, right? And they're like, well, okay, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. But willingness is the first one. So you have to be willing to see, right? And the second one is seeing, consciousness. The moment we bring awareness to something, it loses power.
Yes.
Right. The moment you become aware that you're tying up your fear of expanding, of taking risk, of being seen, and you tie it up to that story, that moment, that story lost power.
Yeah.
Now, there's still some work that we need to do, right? We need to transform the belief. We need to we need to release the emotion, right? We need to tell our subconscious that, hey, it's not dangerous anymore. We can take risk and it's going to be all right, right? And then we need to re-signify the story. We need to make peace with that, right? So we need to say, yes, I lived through that, but it gave you it gave you a gift, right? And I'm going to guess, but I'd say that situation for you, what it brought you is you became very meticulous. You became very, yeah, I like this, I like that, and be very careful in what you're doing, right? And you develop that ability to be very meticulous and very good at what you do because you don't want to mess up.
Exactly.
So that's the gift. So now you can integrate that story into your life. But now the third step is we got to create a new story towards the future. How do you move forward? Who do you want to be right now? Like, you want to keep being meticulous. You want to keep being good at what you're at, but not from fear.
Yes.
Right? You want to be able to expand.
Yeah.
Right? So now we got to create a new story.
I like this because, as you know, this telecast is the Big Brand Formula, and my work is about big branding. And so one of the things that I often tell my clients and students is that you have to be willing to assume your throne and claim your space in your area of specialty. And that requires what? To your point, affirming your own greatness, embracing your greatness, and then stepping into it. However, we got to let go. I call it, you know what I call it? We got to get the poop out the fishbowl. I mean, it's like people have all these dreams and ambitions and they want to be this and do that. And yet here they are in this thing called life. Here they are in this thing called business ownership. And they're trying to look ahead to see who they can be and what they can have. And they don't realize they're swimming in murky waters. They can't even see what's in front of them. And so those waters have to be cleaned out, right? The poop has to be removed. That's how I like to put it. And so I like where you're going with this because all it is a story. Something happened. Like, I'll just speak for myself. Something happened when I was a kid. There are other incidents, but I'm not going to get into those, but something happened. And then I made an interpretation around it in terms of what it must mean. And that's what held me back. So let's talk about the entrepreneurs though, because I get it with the teams. I really do. Because if you're going to be a leader, right? But let's say, because do you work with solopreneurs at all? You work with?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yes.
So they don't have teams. So they're me, myself, and I. So what do you do in that situation? Because I know for a lot of our listeners out there, they're wondering, hey, I want to make sure that I remove my handcuffs. I want to remove those things that are holding me back from stepping into my greatness. What advice do you have for those folks?
Yeah. I want to say something before to your point, because you mentioned greatness, and I think one of the key things that we want to understand and embrace is that our greatness comes from the story that we've experienced, or our life, right? That's our greatness.
Yes.
So as long as we're fighting our story, we're not embracing our own greatness. It's the moment we make peace with that story is the moment we start embracing our greatness, right? And that's really important. And to your point about solopreneurs, one of the things that's really important is embracing that in a way that, how do you want to expand? And here's I'll tell you a personal story. My experience as a kid was I do everything on my own, right? Because of family situations. My mom's attention, my parents are divorced, so I grew up with my mom and my sister. My mom's attention is 99% based on my sister. So I learned to do things on my own. So since I'm a little kid, I'm putting myself to bed, I'm doing my homework on my own. It's like, that's fine. It's like, so when I start my own business, I'm on my own. right? I'm a solopreneur. And it took me to a point where I couldn't grow anymore because I couldn't handle everything that needed to be done, right? And one of the things that I had to make peace with is getting help,
Wow.
right? And being able to feel supported and have a team and trust my team, right? And when I made peace with that, then I started hiring people and my business started growing, right? And but here's the other thing, that at some point I had this idea of where I wanted to take my business. And it was, I wanted to build a consulting firm that was the biggest one in Central America and in family business, which is the first area that I started working with 15 years ago. And I had those ideas of how big I wanted it to be, how many people I wanted working with me, and how many clients I wanted to serve. And then it hit me. I was working 70 to 80 hours a day. I was making a lot of money, but I had no time to take a vacation. Right? So it hit me. It's like, why am I doing this? And I had no answer other than it's what I'm supposed to do because I studied business and I'm building a business and businesses need to grow. And it was like, oh my God. It's like, no. So I closed my business. I closed my business. I took a sabbatical year. I went to Spain and I restructured myself. And I said, okay, so I want to move away from family businesses. I want to do conscious leadership and conscious business, which is not about growing my business infinitely. It's about creating impact.
I like that. I like that.
And right now, the place where I'm at, it's like I want to grow my impact, not my business.
Whoa.
That doesn't mean that my business is not going to grow. That means that I'm focused on the impact, not the size of the business. And that shifted everything for me.
Oh my goodness, that is so great. So this is about expanding your influence as you transcend your own personal limits, right? So what advice do you have to folks around how they can make that happen? Like if you were to say, here are 3 things that you really need to do or understand or be willing to step into and address, what will those be?
Yeah, first one is why. Like, why are you doing this? Right? And that was my path, right? Why was I building this consulting firm? Because I had to, right? Because it was the business thing to do. And when it shifted into why am I doing this, and you mentioned it at the beginning, because I want to raise consciousness so that we can all have greater well-being, everything shifted for me. Right. So first one is why, is find your why, right? Which is purpose. The second one is start looking, it's like bring your awareness within. It's like where in yourself are you self-sabotaging or limiting, right? It's, sabotaging is a bit aggressive, but self-limiting. It's like, what is a story that you're telling yourself that is keeping you from growing? And it's like, no, it's a market. No, it's not the market, right? Oh, it's my branding. Well, yeah, your branding may not be perfect, but why haven't you hired Gerry? It's like, what's keeping you from that, right? It's like, so are you afraid of being seen? Are you afraid of growing your business and not having time for, right? So I've had clients who are like, oh, I don't know why my business is growing. And then after we have a talk, then they come up with this conclusion that they don't want to grow their business because they have this idea that growing their business means taking time away from the kids or not having time for themselves. It's like, well, is that true? Is that true? Can you really not grow your business if you, without misleading your life or stepping away from your family? Is that true? And at that moment, they may not have an answer, but when we open up that possibility, I want to grow my business without like missing life with my kids, then our subconscious starts working on finding solutions. right? And we start having those conversations. How can I do this without missing this? Or how can I do this and still have this, right? So purpose, bringing your awareness within and finding those self-limiting thoughts or beliefs and stories that are keeping you from moving into what you want.
So this is about conscious leadership, conscious entrepreneurship for people who are unconscious but think they're conscious.
This is really interesting because consciousness is not something, it's not static. It's a way of being. So the moment we think we arrived, we lost consciousness. So here's something really important. It's like it's like driving your car and then you're like, okay, so I arrived at the place where you're supposed to go, and now you're not driving, now you stop. Consciousness is a constant voyage, right? Or journey. Right? You are constantly paying attention and recognizing. So if you think you arrived at a state of consciousness, you miss that state. It's like you haven't arrived. You are going through it. It's like you're living it, right? So, and that's one of the things that is really key to understanding this and to working with ourselves. It's like we're never over the hump. Like we're just in a straight line, but we got to understand that we have to be at this place where we're always paying attention to our story. Always. Like we're always bringing our awareness within. It's not something I dealt with that a year ago, so I don't have to deal with that again. It's like, well, if it's showing up again, then there's something else you need to see. There's something else you need to work with.
So you mentioned self-limiting beliefs. What are some of the most common self-limiting beliefs that you've come across that hold so many entrepreneurs back with or without a team? What are some examples?
Well, I think one of them is, I think there's a couple that are really common. One, it's hard, right? and that makes no sense. Like nothing is hard, right? We make it hard, right? But when we think that things are hard, then we have to make them hard for ourselves so that our idea, our belief, it becomes true, right? Or holds up, right? So things are not hard or easy. Things just are, right? There's things that take time, right? And that's it, right? It's like, well, it's hard. No, they just take time. It's like you can't grow a tree from one day to the other, right? Growing a tree takes time. Is it hard for the tree to grow to 10, 13, or 50 feet? No, it's not hard. It just takes time, right? So things are hard as one. And then the other one that I think is really common is that I don't feel I'm worth it.
Not
right?
good enough, whatever. Yeah.
And that is more of a cultural belief that we assume on an individual level. Then it's like, even if we have a perfect family, most of us still have this idea that we're not worth it because society tells us until you have this, or even if you have this, then there's the next step. You always have to be striving for more. So it's like we're never there, right? And this is the way we also do marketing in our unconscious marketing, right? So we market towards creating a sense of lack or scarcity in people so that they buy our product. It's like that creates that feelings like, oh, I'm not good enough until I have this new phone, this new TV, until I do this. Like that's a cultural situation that we live that limits us. Instead of understanding that we are abundant, we're living in an abundant, especially if you live in a first world countries, like you live in an abundant state, right? And you're just not recognizing.
So this is really great. Okay, so this whole thing about empowering ourselves and having a kind of mindset for success. I mean, on the surface, this is nothing new. I mean, this has been around for God knows how long. However, what I'm picking up about you, though, which I really like, And this is one of the things that I stress is what lies at the heart of a big brand, a thrilling original brand, is to bring something to the world that is unique, fresh, and original that the world perhaps has never heard or seen before. And what I'm hearing is that your SER model does that. Because for people to have those kind of breakthroughs in the midst of breakdowns, for people to be able to step into a tomorrow that is better than their yesterday, for people to realize that they are meant to be the head and not the tail, they've got to have the tools for that. And that starts with mindset that then leads to the doingness. So share with our listeners, if you would please, about the SER model, because I don't want people to think that, oh my God, this guy's going to make me go back and talk about my mother and my father and relived childhood incidents. I'm going to start crying and babbling. So share with us about how this process is. And is it, I don't want to use the word easy, but is it painless? Is it, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Things are meant to be, there's a difference between pain and suffering. So pain is something that's real, happening at the moment. Suffering is a story we tell ourselves that it creates uneasiness, right? So processes are meant to be without suffering, right? There may be some pain at some point that comes up, but suffering is unnecessary. What the model does is it gives us a roadmap to ourselves, right? It gives us a roadmap to when we bring our awareness within, what do I look for? Because we're never taught to look within, right? We're always taught to look outside and what's going on outside, right? So one is bring our awareness within, but then how do I deal with all the situations that are going on? So it gives us a structure, right? So we got to be aware of our body and take care of our body. It's like we can't be a full potential leader when our body is not in an optimal state, right? If I'm tired, if I am, if I don't have the nurturing of my body, if I don't give my body the food that it needs, if I don't exercise, then my body is not in an optimal state, and I'm not going to be able to operate well, right? Our emotions, right, which is paying attention, learning to recognize our emotions and deal with them. Our belief system, our intellect, our mind, and our ego, right? And then what is learning to differentiate them and how to deal with our ego versus our mind, or our ego versus our belief, right? And how to transform them and how to restructure them when we need to, right? So that's what the model does, is it gives us that, and it's also composed of 5 principles, which is basically, it gives us a guiding light to how to make decisions. So the first principle is purpose, right? It's like, so as long as we're focusing on purpose, it creates well-being, right? Because we are social beings. And that's the second principle. Understand that we're interdependent, we're all interconnected, right? So since we're interconnected, we're all social beings, when we have purpose, we have a reason to belong to the tribe, right? So that gives us easiness, that gives us peace within, right? And it leads us to expansion. Then responsibility, it's like, stop playing the victim, become the architect of your own life, right? And then compassion, how do you create value for yourself and others, right? And the last principle, which is really important, is having a beginner's mindset. Like, I'm always seeking to learn and expand, right? If you think you arrived, then you're stuck. You're not listening anymore, you're not growing anymore, you're not expanding anymore, you're stuck. When you have a beginner's mind, you're always learning, you're always connecting to others, you're always expanding.
Well, I love those principles, because those are the principles that anyone can adopt to propel themselves into being a conscious leader. And that's one of the things that I believe in, because at the heart of big branding is to be looked upon as being preeminent in your space. Number one in your industry, your category, your field of expertise, whatever it is that you do. However, you have to be conscious and aware of what's required in terms of who you need to be, so that you can then do what needs to be done to build your business and have the impact that you want to have. So listen, this has been fantastic. I mean, you are extraordinary. Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners in terms of anything that you have on the horizon, any events coming up, any further tips or insights or suggestions that you can make, because people really, I think, want to be that leader. They want to be that person that they've always aspired to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the book. The book's coming up at the end of March, and then it'll be available. It's learning about the search. It's the model and how we can work with the model. And then it goes hand in hand with a Being Leadership program, which is an online program you can do. So you're reading the book, you're doing the exercises with the program, you're transforming. Then you can go to a website and you can find a free leadership assessment that goes with a free short webinar that will help you understand your leadership style, where you're at, and what's your next step on expanding. Right? So just visit the website, which is SER, leader.com, and you'll get the information there. You can sign up for the book and the online program and do the free leadership assessment.
Well, listen, my friend, I really want to thank you again for being a guest today, coming all the way from Costa Rica, and for the fine work that you were doing. Because anytime any of us have an opportunity to enrich the lives of other people, then we indeed can live a rich life. And so for those of you who have been tuning in today, make it a point to go to my website, GerryFosterBranding.com, go to the podcast page, scale down, and grab this interview with this extraordinary man, Rodolfo Carrillo. And on that page, you will see all the links that you can click on to learn more about him and his books and his programs and all the things that he is doing. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners. This is Gerry Foster, the Big Branding Guy, signing off. Take care.
You have just listened to Big Brand Formula. Thanks for joining us, and make sure to visit our website, GerryFosterBranding.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show and access our resources. If you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes or simply telling a friend about us. Join Gerry again on the next episode of Big Brand Formula, where he can further help create your world-class brand.